Hi, everyone. This is Arry, Chair of the U.S. Blockchain Coalition and your host for Windshield Time podcast and the Blockchain Underground. Today, we had a really great AMA with Dick Hardt on all things identity. We have these every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific, so I'll help you join us. And I hope you learn as much as I did during this session. I mean, just learning about active state and the history and Dick's experience in identity, learning about Amazon, learning about decentralized identity and smart contracts and all sorts of things, soul-bound tokens. Also, quick note, we do teach a class on Bitcoin, blockchain, and crypto fundamentals on Maven. The QR code is right here. So if you'd like to check it out, please sign up. And that's it. Let us know if there's any questions and if we can help with anything. All right, bye. All right, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Dick, for spending your Friday afternoon with us to answer all questions identity. So we have our guest speaker today, Dick Hardt. Dick, would you give an introduction of yourself, long form? How did you get into the space? What's your background? And how did you learn about all these things in the world of identity? Because it's really, really big.
Well, those are a few different questions. My programming career started with Windows 1, and then I was working on an email system, and then did some consulting and hooked a company up to the internet in '93, and left them and started one of the first web companies in Vancouver. But I'd been coding on Windows, and so I wanted Perl on Windows, and was flying back from one of the big first W3C meetings and sat beside who turned out to be Jay Allard, who also was a guy that sort of drove Xbox at Microsoft, and complained to him that Perl 5 wasn't running on Windows. And he says, well, could we pay you to do it? And I said, sure. And so that was probably no people don't know, but Microsoft paid to do a bunch of open source work. So everything we did, we made open source, and we had a number of contracts with Microsoft. And that led to founding Active State with O'Reilly and Associates. And we had a marketing agreement with them, and sat back and we had 1 million of users coming through our site every month, and they had a lot of the same users. And we thought, hey, wouldn't it be great if the user registers on one of our sites, they could click a button and register on the other site, which is, like a lot of the other things, how do I scratch my own itch? That's how I got into identity, was trying to solve that problem.
Wow.
So that led to starting a company, Skip Identity, after we sold Active State. And I did a talk on what I called Identity 2.0, which was all about user-centric identity and how do we get users to have control of their identity. It was back in 2006 at O'Reilly's open source conference. And that became a popular video, partly because of the presentation style. It was 520 slides, 512 slides. I'll put a link. Oops. It's like, come on. Where's my little thing? There, in the chat. So it was a unique presentation style too. So a lot of people just showed it for how to do presentations, which was great because then I just educated people about identity as well. And that got me invited to lots of, give keynotes. I gave that a version of that talk probably 50 times over a couple of years, and invited to lots of meetings with people that were experts around identity. And through sheer exposure of people that were experts, I got to know more and more about identity.
Wow.
Unfortunately, that company didn't survive. So 2008 came along and killed us. And we were trying to sell at the same time. And I worked at Microsoft, and while I was there, I worked on what became OAuth 2 and JSON Web Tokens. Those, OAuth 1 had been problematic for people to implement. And so did that. Also, while I was at Skip, we drove what became the OpenID Foundation because the IETF would not let us go and do what we wanted to do in IETF. And so that led to OpenID 1, OpenID 2, and then eventually OpenID Connect. And then did some other startups in San Francisco, and then moved back up to Seattle, worked in Amazon in their identity group, and then went over to Alexa to work on identity and try to fix identity. And now been working on Hellō, which is, I think, kind of the culmination of how do we actually solve this problem around identity in a way that actually can happen. So I can go into a bunch of details and answer questions about that, but that's sort of my long rambling background and how I got an identity and how I got to have some expertise in it. So I like to say now that I've been exploring the idea maze of identity for a couple of decades and have a pretty good idea around why many things have failed and very few things have succeeded.
Yeah, so why is identity so hard? I mean, I ask even the simple question of like, what is identity? How do you define that? And you end up with like 300 million different answers and perspectives. And it's I'm assuming it's very multidisciplinary, like blockchain world is, but what does that mean?
Well, that is one of the challenges, is what do we mean by that, right? And everyone has one, so everyone has an opinion about what it is as well. So that makes it even more interesting. And I continue to see people coming in with startups and say, hey, this is a big unsolved problem and I've got an idea. And then they work on building and deploying that, and but they don't know why things don't work, right? Like, how do you get adoption, right? So one of the big challenges in identity, and I don't know if there's another market that's like this, is that it's really a three-sided problem, particularly for the type of identity that people view as valuable. How do they prove something about themselves? Because pretty much all the interesting things about yourself are things that other people say about you.
Okay.
Not what you say about yourself. What you say about yourself, self-declared things like uploading whatever profile photo you want or icon or graphic, right? That's straightforward. How to express yourself is fairly solved. Being able to easily move that around is an interesting problem, and people are working on how do you make it easier to take these things about you. But the really interesting thing is, what does the government say your name and date of birth and residence is? Does your employer say that you work there? Where do you really work? What age are you? Are you over 21? Or are you over 65? Are you under 13 or over 13? More interesting things that are in the digital world that are locked up now that you can't really prove about yourself, like what's your Airbnb reputation as a host or as a guest, your Uber reputation, your reputation at eBay. A number of those concepts I talked about in 2006 are still locked up. But I think that if we can unlock the reputation we have in a bunch of different sites, we can make the web a lot more accountable. And because you can come in and say, hey, I've been a good netizen in a bunch of other places. That's a plus for any platform that has, a community of people, because you can come in with a warm start instead of you come into a brand new platform and you having to prove yourself all over again, starting from zero.
Interesting.
So back to the problem, it's a three-sided market, right? There is whoever's making the statement about you. There is you as a user, and then there is the developer of the app or site that wants to get the information, and everybody has to use something that enables them all to move that information around. So a lot of the energy lately in the identity community has been around decentralized identity. A lot of that was inspired by, the very early days of blockchain. Most of the community has moved away from storing identity on the blockchain, but the concept that there's a key you control is sort of a key principle of that. But the idea that it's your identity, you control it, you have it. Now, there's a whole bunch of problems just with that data model, but the biggest issue with that is that it's a three-sided market, and while they're even if everyone could agree on what tech stack it would be, you still need to get adoption by three different parts of a market. And any of you that have tried to drive adoption in a two-sided market know that's hard, let alone adding yet another player into it.
And so we have it. Here we are. So then, there's so many questions. So it's moved away from like blockchain world, but they're still using public-private key type of cryptography to allow people to own and kind of manage some sort of access or authentication around their data.
Yeah, and so Vitalik proposed the soul-bound tokens, which is
Right.
putting it on chain, which what's her name? Evan, who runs disco.xyz, her and Vitalik, had an interview, and she just kicked his ass in a very nice, polite, community-oriented, friendly way, but really demonstrated why that was problematic, right? That if something's public like that about you, right, people can use that as prejudice against you. Like, you're not really in control of it when it's made public, and people
Right.
can just drop things on your address and you can't get rid of them because they're non-transferable. And so her proposal is like, well, you still use a key, but your data isn't public. The challenge with the control of the key is that if you're deep in the crypto world, that kind of resonates with you. You think, this is my key. Well, when you pull it back to have a view where, what are we really trying to solve? A key thing of identity, once again, is what other people say about you, but also that only you can prove that, right? Like it's not your thing, right? It's really an attribute about you that somebody else said. And
Yes.
unlike the blockchain, which solves a hard problem and has really opened up a bunch of very interesting, innovative use cases in the digital world, where you can have assets, where you can transfer that asset without having to have an intermediary. Similar to how you could go and buy something with cash and get something back, or trade goods directly with somebody in the physical world. This lets you do it digitally. The challenge is that the feature of all of that is that it is transferable and that you control that transfer. But you can go and put things in any wallet you want to have, just like you can put your assets wherever you want to put them. Identity is not transferable. So Vitalik was partly right of not making them transferable off of your chain, but the key is still transferable. Like if I give the private key to somebody else, they control it. Right. And I can give the private key to somebody else that has all my Bitcoin, and they then control it. Right. And that's, now if I didn't want to do that, that's too bad. That's called theft. But that is, the downside of the feature of that. But it also means that I can just give it to somebody and it's theirs, right? So it's kind of a bear thing. Whoever controls the key has
bear.
that asset, right?
Yes, bear. That's a good word.
Right, and that it's not so much a bearer token, but it's possession. Like you have that private key, and whoever has that private key can do it. And literally, there could be lots of people that have that private key. So similar to, Netflix is a communal asset in a home, right? Everybody has access to the Netflix password in a home, or to the often, unfortunately, to the Amazon account. Right?
Right.
You don't want to have 5 different Prime accounts in a home.
No.
And they've come up with some ways of just separating that in Amazon, which I know far too much about. But that's one of the challenges, is that the Amazon account doesn't represent the person, it represents the household.
Right.
And so things that are shareable are problematic from that point of view. Yeah. So there's a question. Let's
yes,
go with the question.
Let's take the question. Harish, what's up?
Yes. Hey, Dick, Harish here. So I currently work at Microsoft. I'm a software engineer. So yeah, it's great to hear about the Microsoft story and also your entire history about like what you've done with identity. It's great. And thanks a lot for sharing all the challenges that you're facing and stuff. So I'm just trying to like wrap my head around like what are the big pieces around this. So the based on the things that you explained about identity, for example, it's more, I mean, it's a lot to do with what other people say about you. And if we collect the data and put it into a system, maybe, I mean, whether it can be on chain or off chain and all that. But this is very similar to the credit score we have right now, right? That's essentially, that's kind of like a financial identity as it is right now, right? And that is public information. Or, I mean, maybe it's not so public that anyone can go access it. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, anyone authorized to do so can go access it.
If they pay. If they pay.
Sure. I mean,
yeah,
like
that's actually a pretty key aspect of a number of aspects of identity, is that there are vendors in the market that sell statements about people. Yeah. I think it's problematic how the credit report works now because it's back channel, and there's a huge amount of data, particularly in the US, that's sold back channel, right? Like when you sign up as a driver to Uber calls a bunch of data sources, paying them money to give data about, you know, the information you provided them without you knowing what the response is, and you're not part of that transaction at all.
Right.
My hope is that, you know, surprise. Some people are like surprised, right? And the same thing sometimes for you just as a renter, right? Like they're doing, all these places are trying to make it safer. I think it'd be a lot better if that information was front channel so that you knew what was happening. You know, similar to, I was shocked about this because I grew up in Canada and I came down the US, and that when you wanted to rent a place, you know, you basically had to like, you know, open the Camino and show them everything. You know, look at every record about you, right? And I'm like, well, you know, I'm just applying to rent here. I'm just renting here. Like, why do you need to know all this data? And then I have no idea what really comes back. And then if I'm applying for rent at a couple places, I have to pay every time because they make you pay for it. To me, I think those are opportunities where we can change the dynamic where you can go and get that information and you present it. And you present it in a way that the recipient knows it's true about you, right? Then that's the key thing, that there needs to be high assurance that the person providing it is actually, the information is actually about the person providing it.
Right.
But that you have visibility into what it is and not.
Right.
But it also needs to be done in a way where the people that are in that business make money. Because if they're not, everyone's going to continue to use what already works, right? There's going to be zero, you know, they're not going to give you that, your credit score, to give away free to everybody, right? That, you know, there's no business in that. They're not going to do it anymore. And the people that want credit reports, which are super useful and innovated a bunch, because before credit reports, there just wasn't scale in being able to get credit.
Right.
But you may have been going somewhere else with all of that. So, but you prompted me to go on a tangent. So tell me.
No, that's
a question yet. I've
that's
just
totally fine.
Yeah.
No, that's totally fine. So the question that I was going to with this was, so with the credit rating system, there is a system that it works right now, and I'm not sure. I mean, probably there are lots of places for it to be improved. So this. So like you mentioned, because this is the credit score and everything is controlled by a central entity, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it, especially with your knowledge. Data can be shared or can be sold, which essentially your data, which is getting sold by a third party to a different person altogether. But all of these things seem ripe for like actually doing things through smart contracts and being on chain. Now,
Should we dive into that conversation there before you go too much further? because I don't
Sure.
agree with that. I do not think that they go on chain as smart contracts. Primarily because privacy is a human right.
Can you tell us why? Because I'd be very curious to know why you don't want it to go into a smart contract.
Privacy is a human right? You don't want that information to be public. And then how does it actually bind you?
Privacy is only a human right until you want to come to my house. If you want to come to my house, you better give up all your privacy or you're not coming in.
Right, but I don't have to come into your house.
No, and you also don't have to use Facebook or Google. It is a choice like everything else. It's a private company.
Sure, but I do need somewhere to live and I do need able to buy food, right? There's a number of things that are fundamental.
If you need somewhere to live and you want to rent from me, you better tell me your social security or your blood type or what your mother did for a living, if that's my choice. Because this is my house, and if you want me to rent to my house, you better give me the information I want.
I fully agree, but if I decide to share that because I'd like to rent in your house, I like to know that I'm sharing it with you. I'm not sharing it with the world. And the challenge with things on chain is they're on chain, right?
No,
They're
you can
public.
have
They're available to everybody.
no. You can have a hashed information on chain. It doesn't have to be unhashed, right?
So technically there are some ways to go and make it all happen on chain. The challenge is, how are you going to get adoption of all of that technology? Because it's a three-sided market. So, it all is technically possible. It's just hard and it isn't widely deployed. The other challenge of being on chain is the model is, oh, I prove I've got a key, and so then this must be about me. And identity doesn't really work like that. Because if I have the key, I can give anybody else the key, right? And so you're renting me the house, you want to know that it's really information about me and not, that Harish lent me his key and I go and say, hey, look at all this great stuff about me. And you say, oh, okay, I'll rent it to you. But it wasn't really about me. It was about Harish.
Wait, but why do I really care if Harish is going to pay me $10 million because he gave you the key and the information was bad? As long as I have collateral, I don't really care, do I?
Well, if all you need is collateral, then you don't need to know anything about me, do you?
No, I still need to know about you because unfortunately, especially in your socialist Canada, you have laws that you cannot evict people if they don't pay rent.
Well, so just to clarify, I live in the US right now. So, and
okay.
I was surprised when I moved to the US about that. I rented a place at one point and two times we rented. And I just found the whole process super surprising. Similar to the whole US healthcare system.
I'm very
but
sorry.
anyway, the whole point of renting is usually that the person that's renting doesn't have a lot of collateral, which is why there are background checks to make sure that the people don't get, rip you off, and because it's hard to go and evict somebody once you've let them lease it. But if I go and I share Harish's information that shows, that I've got, you think I've got a great credit rating, I've always paid my rent on time, but I haven't, right? Because it isn't my info, right? As it turns out, I haven't paid my rent on time, but Harish lent me his key so I could prove that on chain. I mean, this is why it's actually not going to get deployed, is because it's hard for people to know who are we really dealing with.
Yeah, sorry if I can just continue.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Go back.
So I think like you mentioned, like three kind of issues, three broad issues with like putting identity on chain, or identity related stuff. I mean, stuff about you on chain, right? So there's privacy risk. There's a ton of information, private information sitting on chain, which could be public. I mean, essentially, it's a privacy like gold mine or like time bomb or whatever. But for that, so that is one. The other one being shared, like a key that can be shared to any person. Third one being like getting adoption for all of this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The first one, technically,
yeah.
you can overcome. It just becomes really complicated, and no one's
Sure.
proven it works well. And as soon as the challenge with anything around security is you have to plug all the holes, and the bad guy only needs to find one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. So if we leave the first one out for time being, about the second two, meaning the keys being shareable and the getting adoption, isn't it like wouldn't off-chain solutions face the same problem? The way what I'm thinking about it, for example, on chain, sure, I can just give my private keys over to somebody and they can just pretend as me. But the same thing can happen in a off-chain like method as well. For example, if I just have a user ID and password, I can just give it to anybody and they can like they can pretend as me. Or if there is any security hardware token, unless it's like tied to, biometrically tied to me, or maybe there is even ways to kind of like get past that. But like you mentioned, it's a super hard problem to solve, but it's also a problem that can happen off chain. I'm talking about the shareability of digital identity to somebody.
Well, no. So there's sharing credentials. The things that work are where, so digital identity is deployed successfully in a number of jurisdictions, just not the ones that most of us live in. And it works, right? So Estonia, bank ID in the Nordic countries, SingPass. And, they've had some challenges of people sharing identity, but the barrier to sharing it is that you want people to have a big disincentive to sharing because they don't want someone else to be able to be them, right? And so really what you try to do is you try to make it that access is super valuable so that you don't want anyone else, right, to do it, right? Like essentially, if I give you access to my entire, password chain, right? I'm not going to do that, right? That gives you access to everything, right? But I might share my Netflix password and account with you, right? It's like, what do I care, right? You watch Netflix, doesn't hurt me. And for a number of the proposed technologies around identity, they're doing a bunch of things to make them more privacy preserving, so that you share very little about you. But then that means that if I have a key that doesn't really have a lot about me and that you can share and there's no actual repercussions to me because nobody knows who actually shared it, right? Now you've got something that's easily lendable for anybody to take to prove they're over 21, which, defeats the whole purpose of proving you're over 21. So people aren't going to, it's just not going to get adopted because it has a fatal flaw in its architecture. And so for these countries that have these identity systems, right, being able to prove you're that person, and often these are tied to the citizen values, right, that, you can apply for healthcare or get unemployment or vote or any of these things, right? There's a big disincentive to sharing those credentials associated with that. And so you could do the same thing with a key on blockchain, because really it's just a key, is just the one credential. The other challenge of that, though, is that it's a key tied to a specific public-private key pair. And so you also get into all of the key recovery and like, what if somebody else gets the private key? And so that in the blockchain, it's a very tight combination between the asset and ownership of the key. But in most identity systems, the credentials are completely separated from all the statements. The credentials is how you access the resource to do something, as opposed to that it's tightly bound to the resource. So you can change your password or change your PIN codes or change whatever mechanism you have for logging in. You can enroll multiple mechanisms for logging in. And while you can do that wrapping around a key, really the fundamental thing is the key. And so like if someone has gets my mother's private key, right? Well, that's a fundamental failure, right? One way to think about this is I have $1,000 in my back pocket. I walk down the street and it falls out of my back pocket. So sad, too bad. If I'm walking down the street, my wallet falls out of my pocket and somebody picks it up, right? Well, if my wallet is really just a private key, right? I have to be able to recover my identity. I can't, somebody else can't just have that, right? It's not an asset the same way as other things in blockchain are. So I don't know. I don't know if you even got all the way through to your questions there, but I'm.
No, I think. Yeah, I think so. The point that you raised about on-chain ID being very tightly coupled with the actual resource. Yeah, right now I don't think like the moment I lose a private key, there's no way to recover and take back control of that that data, the resource. I think that that makes sense. But on the but the sharing keys problem is still sharing keys and adoption. It still exists very much so in the off-chain world as well.
In the off-chain world, the key thing is that you want access to that digital identity to be so all-encompassing that people don't want to share. Most of the architectures in the crypto world, I could get one thing assigned to one key, another thing assigned to another key, another thing assigned to another key. Now, you could have a system where it puts it all together, right? But once
that has a key, but the same problem.
Right.
Like once I lose.
Yeah, so you would solve the problem by forcing a whole bunch of stuff to be associated to one key. Right. But now you've got this like super valuable single key. If you lose it, it's like, oh no, right?
Master key.
Right. Where in the crypto world, right, you can spread your assets across a bunch of keys. Right. So if you lose one, no big deal. But you don't want that kind of architecture and identity. You want them all tied to one thing. So that
it feels like
there's a big disincentive to lending.
Yeah, so it feels like it's a chicken and egg problem. Right. So I need everything to be attached to one entity, but then attaching to one entity is a problem itself because it's what, all or nothing.
That's actually how identity works, right? Like in the US, that driver's license or your passport, right? That one thing is the basis for almost every other thing you do in the real world.
But it's like multi-sig though, because you have usually when you want something that's very valuable, like a bank account, they want your super one identification, but they also want your proof of residency or where you live with the utility bill. Plus, they also want like your social security number and your birth date, like, right? Like it's sort of like multi-sig of framework when they're looking for that identity.
The bank's doing all of that to comply with KYC.
That's true. But your one identity, like if someone
they
stole
would
my
be
driver's
happy
license,
to just take your money and not get any identity if they could.
but the driver's license itself doesn't unlock everything, even though everything requires the driver's license or passport. No,
you're right. I mean, many things sort of link all together. But in the deployed digital things, they tend to be all tied to your Sing Pass or your bank ID or something like that. Right. And when you think of it in the physical world, like you showed up in the bank, right? There's this one of you, right? And all these other things about you that all link in together to the person standing in front of them in the bank. Yeah.
Oh, Marina has a hand up. Hey, Marina. Is it a hand up from before, or is it the new hand? Marina?
Yes, sorry, I'm on the phone. It takes forever for me to turn it on. So I had a question for you much earlier. It is from before, kind of, but I want to go back to it. So the reason you might be willing to share your identity, the reason when you share your identity, you're not going to be willing to share it is because if I rent an apartment, don't pay rent, you would be responsible. You're basically becoming a co-signer in that case. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like if you lend me your
Yes, well,
identity and I say I'm you, and then I rent an apartment, I don't pay rent, they can take the money out of your wallet and a chain. That assures it, right?
So now you're bringing up some questions around like what are you sharing, right? Like, I mean, if you're sharing everything about yourself, like your proposal is that somebody could apply to rent your home fully off chain, which of course is fictitious because you're probably going to want to see the person and you're going to want some government ID to know really who it is and bind that all together so that, the person that you're interacting with, which person you're interacting with, they are proving it's really them, i.e. that's really their name, etc. So that then if they don't pay you, you can take legal recourse against them and you can prove to a court that this person really did sign this contract to be able to do all of that. And yeah, you can, I mean, technically it's all possible to kind of do. There are a whole bunch of challenges around how do you do that. So if you had, if all of Harish's data is all tied to that key, so that's what I'm borrowing when I'm doing, well, Harish is going to have a huge, he's not going to be motivated to do that. He's going to say, I don't want you to do that, Dick. Like, I don't trust you to do that. You're being me. I don't want to be me. I don't want to be legally responsible for what you're doing. And he's not going to want to loan that to me. But a number of the proposals in the space are being able to do transactions in a much more privacy friendly way where you're only sharing some attributes about yourself, right? So this is probably not applicable to renting a house, but it could be that all I'm sharing is that I've got a good credit score and that I've got X dollars in the bank and, something like that. That's very privacy friendly, right? And I hope we can get to something like that. And so it's minimally sharing what's there and that you're providing some service in exchange for that, knowing that I'm going to keep doing something, but that it actually isn't true. So someone asked about the zero knowledge proofs. And yeah, that is one of the technologies to make it much more privacy friendly. Which means that nobody really knows who did it, which means it makes it even easier to share.
Mm-hmm. So I have a, Rena, is that good for your question? Because I have a question. What's the difference between what we're talking about right now at this thing that we're trying to describe and pinpoint identity and verifiable credentials?
So VCs are yet another technology, but there's a whole story on the drama behind the standardization of that. If anybody wants to know, I can go into that because all the major browsers opposed it. And then that was position. Oh yeah. Well, I don't know all the major browsers, but Google opposed it and Mozilla opposed it. Like they wrote formal oppositions, which is super rare in the W3C, the standards body where it was done. And the directors overrode their things, which is like, Really? Okay, so much for rough consensus on this.
Oh, really? So people aren't
Oh,
loving
actually, sorry, I got my standards confused. That was on the decentralized identifier standard,
So the DIDs, yeah.
the DIDs. But DIDs are a recommended identifier in verifiable credentials.
So it's a particular solution or way of doing verifiable credentials.
It's a way of identifying the parties in verifiable credentials. And so,
Okay.
and if you have, the Washington vaccine card on your phone,
Oh, I don't, but yeah, I have a photo of it.
well, okay, that's close. You have one of the paper,
I do.
not the digital one.
I took a picture of it. Actually, I sent a picture
A
of it.
picture of the paper one or of the digital one?
I don't have a digital one. I took a picture of the paper one and sent it into this government agency group actually this past week, and they denied me from speaking at their event because I didn't get my booster shot.
Oh, so let's see if I can get this to.
One with
Okay,
the QR
there's like a
code.
QR code. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a QR code thing. Of course, I gotta like figure out how to make it like pull back. Yeah, there we go.
It showed up
Anyway,
briefly.
so there's mine, and this one here
Mhm.
is for my friend's cat that he made up. And that'll scan and it'll pull up data. So that's a use case that's a VC.
That's a verifiable credential.
That's a verifiable credential. It's using the verifiable credential format. The smart health card is that.
So then question is, we have 3 states that have actually tried to push verifiable credentials bills in California, Washington, and New Jersey recently. Washington failed because, the privacy said it was anti-humanity, anti-privacy, and all sorts of things, which I was kind of surprised to hear. The ACLE was totally against DIDs and verifiable credentials, also very surprising to me. I think a version of it is passing in California right now. It's related to healthcare credentials, and New Jersey TPD. We'll see how it goes. But I don't know, are you tracking this? And I think we tried to frame it all around the trust framework out of Canada. Does that ring any alarm bells for you, or do you go,
I'm reasonably familiar with the model in Canada, which hasn't got all the adoption they've wanted. But I think there's a number of layers to all of this discussion around what's going on, right? So one, VCs are a great technology when used properly, right? So I should look into what the ACLU's questions, but I would imagine it was an implementation concern as opposed to a concern with the actual technology.
I think, yeah, they were saying, well, this is going to allow for surveillance of humans. It'll create a big brother. It's anti-privacy. We don't want all of these credentials online. I mean, that was basically the crux of their argument. It's anti-privacy. Yeah.
And that tends to be implementation issue.
Okay.
Right. And so in the healthcare thing I showed you, the health record, DIDs are only used for who made the statement. And so so the Washington, whatever, that signed the DID, right? You can go and resolve the DID and verify that they actually made that verifiable credential, right? Which is in the name that the credential is verifiable. Okay. But there's no DID for the people. But all the DID people think that people will have DIDs, of which I say that's a horrible idea because it goes back to controlling a private key to prove that you control a DID, which is like has all these other issues. And so they don't use that. They say, oh, these are great, but it's like, sure, but that isn't actually how it's used. And so the identifiers for the person are your name and date of birth. And so that whenever you go and you show one of these vaccine cards, you also show your driver's license. So somebody links does that name and date of birth on the vaccine card match the one on the driver's license? And then I go and, it's an authentication chain of, is a person standing in front of me match a driver's license?
Creating some HIPAA issues as well.
Uh,
No, right? Like,
you consented to present your vaccine card, so that's compliant with HIPAA. Like,
but you're being forced to, like, if I want to go,
you don't have to go anywhere.
you don't have to, but I mean, people don't say like you have to be, to just be like a little bit vulgar, you have to be circumcised or uncircumcised to be entering this building, right? Like that's to me, that's the ridiculousness of being this ask that people are asking, are you vaccinated or not vaccinated? Do you did you have LASIK surgery or not LASIK surgery? Like, these are things that should not matter on whether or not I am capable and competent and should be allowed to participate in a speaking at an event, for example.
And this is some of the challenges with identity work, is it rapidly blurs over to societal values.
Right.
What can we do? What can we not do? But we've had these challenges for all of society anyway, right?
Right.
The term shibboleth, right? You could only enter this, where that came from?
No.
I should probably. There was one tribe that could say the word and another tribe where those sounds didn't exist. And so if you could say shibboleth, you could come into the walls of the city, right?
Wow.
And so it was kind of the password, but not really a password. It was really around, did you know how to say the word? And if you hadn't grown up, in a culture where you said those sounds, you wouldn't be able to pronounce those sounds. It's like Japanese trying to say L's, right?
Right.
It's hard.
But it's
Which
like
is why Lululemon was named Lululemon, by the way.
Oh, really?
But it was really hard, so the Japanese people couldn't say it.
Lululemon. But like, these types of rules allow society to create the other so that we can create, random things to keep other people out. Right. And
so there's two angles to this. All right.
Okay.
One of them is, what are they visibly using to make judgments?
Mm-hmm.
And what are they not visibly using?
True.
And so I believe the non-visible ones are the ones we want to get rid of, right? We want to not have people be making decisions, right, where, oh, we're not letting you in, right? It's really because you're a girl, right? But they're using some other reason.
Right. Okay.
Or they don't say the reason, but the judgment was made because of some other aspect, because they learned about it in what you're sharing. And so I think a key thing we can do in the digital world is remove a lot of prejudice that happens, whether people know about it or don't know about it, because you can share just the information somebody needs, right?
Okay.
You look at somebody's resume, right? And there's all kinds of stuff you learn about there that isn't necessarily related to their job. It's like, oh, that name, that's a funny name. That's a foreign name. That's a girl's name. That looks like a name of somebody that's really old, right?
Yeah. Or they look at my name, they expect a man and I show up, I never get the job. Yeah.
So while there might be things that are visibly happening, and that's something at least we can go and have a discussion about that versus the invisible biases that happen today.
What do you think about large corporations like the Intels and IBMs of the world that have identity processes and systems that they're trying to implement in government? Have you followed this sort of stuff?
Give me a little more context. I'm not sure. I mean, they're all vendors selling identity, but like that word covers so many different things, right?
Yeah, I think they're interested in selling, like, obviously, like the authentication type of systems that verify you are who you are, whatever their process is around that. And then they also have ideas of how to handle just like licenses, for instance, like driver licenses. I think that's as far as I go. Like that's all I remember.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, so there. One aspect of identity is fraud detection.
Mm.
And that's, you're really moving into security related issues, and almost all modern fraud systems use machine learning and AI to try to detect patterns to see, is that anomalous or not, right? Is this a pattern that looks like a bad guy? Is this how a good guy normally is? All the big tech companies, while we might not be happy with Google and Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft, and Apple, they're all very good at protecting your online account, right? Like I could probably type in for sure I could type in my Google username and password here and nobody be able to get in, right? Because it's got two-factor. But even on something that was only single factor, that I think is single factor, which is only my password and username, very unlikely anybody here to be able to actually get into that account at any of those services. Right. Because it just wouldn't look like me, right? It's not from one of my devices, right? And so, this may have happened to any of you, go to Europe and you go to log into Facebook, right? It goes and makes you do some other factors of like, which one of these is your friends or some other piece of data they have, even if they had two factors, because you've never logged in from Europe, right? And so that's anomalous. And so they protect your account. And so, I think all of that type of activity is great, of, better protecting and securing our accounts and making the internet safer. There's all kinds of other controversial, face recognition tech and how that gets used, and, people building databases of that and using it in ways that isn't transparent. The lack of transparency on a bunch of the decisions as to whether you get something or not, I think is problematic, right? And in many ways, that's really where the privacy issues are, which is that you don't even know the data people, like there's a ton of data about all of us that a bunch of other orgs have. And ironically, it isn't actually Google and Facebook, because the data they have about us is really things they've built up in their data models that when you look at that data, it doesn't mean anything, right? You can't take it and do anything anywhere else. Enables them to predict what would be a good ad to show you, but doesn't help anybody figure out other things about you.
So I guess we're down to the last few minutes here, Dick. If sounds like this is obviously this is a very hairy topic with lots of different nooks and crannies. Do you have a good couple recommendations on good places to read, newsletters, people to follow other than yourself, of course, that are good for like someone like me or anyone in this group to check out? Or
well, the Identity 2.0 talk, many people have viewed that as what inspired them to get into doing work in identity, which is kind of
posted.
Yeah, it's in the chat. Yeah.
Yep, you posted your talk.
And then there's Kim Cameron's Laws of Identity.
Kim Cameron.
The late Kim Cameron, unfortunately.
Okay.
And we use those at Hellō as our guide for how do we protect users' privacy, right? And so if you want to understand technically what you should be doing and not doing, that's a great guide.
Great. Cool. And then I guess, of course, thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us, but what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you or follow you if they want to learn more? Dick
Hardt, DICKHARDT. So dick.hart@gmail.com, at hello.coop, at Dick Hardt on Twitter, github./Dick Hardt. Twitter's probably the
Hardt.
easiest thing to follow. Yeah.
Dick Hardt, Dickhardt.
Good German name.
Yeah, well, I learned so much. Thank you so much for spending time with us and answering questions. Hope everyone else had a great introduction or
Yeah.
preview into all the things.
Hopefully you didn't have any burning questions, Tony, because you didn't get anything. No. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me, Arry. Marina, Harry, thank you so much for the questions. Appreciate the discussion. I thought it was going to be lively since I'm a contrarian on using blockchain for identity. But in Hellō, we let you log in with your crypto wallet, right? Like, that's as an authentication mechanism, it's fabulous, right? It's a key you control. You just don't want it to be the only way to prove who you are.
Okay, well, people
I'm
check
sorry.
out Hellō. Go ahead, Marina.
What?
What's up?
Why would it be a bad if it's the only way to prove who I am?
You want to be able to recover in case you lose it.
Right, which is why I don't want to use biometrics, because I'm not going to cut off my fingers or both of my eyes. But I don't have a problem of having, different wallets, and I only need to prove it for whatever transaction I want to do now, and then I can use another one. As long as a transaction guaranteed by an enormous amount of money that you don't want to lose, you're all good, right? Just like in a court, if you want to get out on bail, as long as the bail like $10 million or whatever, you're pretty assured that you're going to get back. And if not, $10 million is pretty good payback.
Yeah, but lots of identity things aren't really tied to money. But we just use it. You prove you have the key, right? There's nothing goes on chain. It's really just proving possession of the key. But you should have more than one way of doing it so that if you lose your key, you can recover your account.
Right. So you should be able to have more than one wallet, right?
Sure.
Or even
having multiple keys isn't a problem at all. Yeah.
Or even have a wallet for recovering your other wallets, sort of like a super password thing.
Right. But at Hellō, we only use this as to how do you log in to access Hellō, right? There's none of your identity is tied to the wallet or the chain.
I'm not sure what Hellō is. I'm sorry. I was 5 minutes late when I logged in.
Oh, we didn't even talk about it, but you can go to hello.coop, right? As opposed to, I think it's problematic to go and have a for-profit company managing people's identity. And so we've set Hellō up to be a cooperative that's owned by the members, for the members. Visa, MasterCard revolutionized payments. They're problematic organizations now, but in the early days, they, accelerated and ripped out tons of friction on the costs for both, made it much more convenient for people to buy things and merchants to take payment. And we think we can do the same things with Hellō, but we're structuring ourselves in ways that Visa, MasterCard didn't by ensuring that users have a voice in how it all works.
Can you give me
we're way
one
over
example?
time.
Just one more thing, Arry, sorry.
Okay.
Can you give me one example of one thing that was innovated, not for profit company, but by somebody else, like NGO, government, anything, because I can't think of a single one.
Bitcoin?
That was innovated.
Can I think of an example of something that was innovative?
Yes, it's something that was innovated by anything other than for-profit company.
Yeah, Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nuclear energy. Oh, you mean that's not innovated by who? Like an organization or by
a for-profit company. I think that's what she.
No, by not by for-profit company. Bitcoin is a very special case that I absolutely believe that was innovated by the people who were trying to get rid of any kind of NGOs or governments. I'm sorry, I'm on a T station. You can just hang up on me.
Okay. Well, There's Marina. She likes to challenge and ask really good questions.
That's great. That's the whole point of having healthy discourse and dialogue, right? If we don't test out all the ideas, we all need to be open to learning and having our points of view challenged and potentially changed.
So can you quickly throw another example besides Bitcoin, please?
I don't know that my expertise is also innovation. It would be around identity. So
yeah, there's a boatload of identity standards that were developed not by for-profit companies, but with contributions for folks that went into it.
Anyway, can we
Linux Foundation? Linux Foundation?
Can I just Linux Foundation also were created by IBM and DEC, but it's a long story and I don't want to take your time. Is there any chance I can connect with you on Telegram? Dick?
I can't hear what you said.
Dick, are you on Telegram? Marina's a question mark on Telegram, but that's all she communicates through.
I'm everywhere. I don't really know how to tell people to get up, find me on Telegram without sharing my phone number.
Oh, you must have a username.
Can you just find the
If I have a username, it's going to be Dick Hardt.
No. Can you just find my 5 letters on Telegram? It's IQ, D is in dog, A is in apple, N is in Nancy. If Arry can type it in, because I'm on a T in on a phone, I would appreciate it. Just five letters and you'll see a question mark.
Okay, yeah. What's the letters again?
I, Q as in queen, D as in dog, A as in apple, N as in Nancy.
And there's IQ Dan, IQ Dance, IQ Dana.
IQ Dan.
Do you see a question mark?
Yep.
The one with the question mark, that's her.
Thank
I just said hi.
Sorry,
I just said hi.
You. Thank you. How is the baby, Arry?
Amazing. He's crawling, he's eating salads, sleeping through the night, the best.
You have to come 5 minutes earlier next time. I want to see the pictures.
Okay, I'll share baby Victor soon again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right. Welcome to Windshield Time, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is non-technical, fun, informative way to learn about money, Bitcoin, blockchains, crypto, and digital assets for busy parents and working folks who are curious about these new technologies. Day, Arry, and their guests talk about these evolutionary systems of money and what they do, y'all. Because what part of your life does money not touch? This podcast is not financial advice, and your reactions are your total and complete responsibility, y'all. Now, thanks again, and enjoy the show.
Stuck inside.